You guys know what people love more than eating junk food and watching rubbish? Countdowns, I guess, or something, I don't know. Anyway, these are my top 3 and bottom 3 basses of the year. Starting with number 3 is my Lary GP2. Taco. Enough. From an objective standpoint, this is not a great bass. It's a cheap bass, that's just what it is. The tuning machines are sticky and bad, the strings that it ships with are kind of gross feeling, and there are a ton of little fit and finish issues all over the taco. All that aside though, I think the actual biggest issue with this bass isn't any of that stuff, it's the neck. For a bass that's aimed at beginners, this thing is just so chunky and unwieldy. And bear in mind, this is coming from a guy who really likes P basses and 5 strings, so when I say that this neck is a lot, know that it's a lot. However, when you consider that this thing is less than 150 bucks shipped to your door, it's kind of hard to stay mad at it. I mean, look at him. He's doing his best. You could do a lot worse than this bass. With a fresh set of strings and a setup, this bass does just fine. It certainly doesn't sound bad anyway. My number 2 bottom bass really is a number 2, the Gibson non-reverse Thunderbird. Oh Gibson, why do you hate bass players? Now, of course, I didn't buy this bass, I just tried it out in a store, but it was just so memorably bad that I couldn't not bring it up. Like, I really wanted to love this bass, it just looked so cool on the wall, but the minute that I grabbed it and picked it up, I just thought, oh no. Like, from the moment that I set it in my lap, I experienced that neck dive that Thunderbirds are just so infamous for, and I experienced the absolute worst setup I have ever seen on a bass. Bad fret edges, strings are a mile off the fretboard, everything you could imagine about this was just awful. It's really hard to believe that a bass that expensive can feel that bad. Like, for a $2,000 bass, you should be able to expect it to have a flawless setup, but I don't know, I guess just Gibson just doesn't really care. Tonally, it's about what you'd expect from a T-Bird. A little bit too dark, not a lot of definition, but probably some of that is the setup. It's such a good looking bass, especially in that red finish, but it's just a complete ergonomic disaster, and I don't think its looks are enough to salvage poor design and really crappy quality control. Moving on to my absolute worst bass of the year, drum roll please! Every acoustic bass ever. All jokes aside, I played a ton of basses this year and the vast majority of them were really great. Like, even the Jackson Bucker had some redeeming qualities and I didn't feel like it deserved a spot on my bottom 3. I've said this before and I'll just keep repeating it. We live in the golden age for gear. This level of consistent quality has never been this affordable. Now with that, let's talk about my top 3 basses of the year. Short scales enjoyed somewhat of a surge in popularity this year, and the absolute best one that I played was the Gretsch Junior Jet 2. The dual humbuckers sound really great, the controls are nicely laid out, and it's a really comfortable bass. And I think it just looks really good. Like, if I didn't already have my pink Mustang for my short scale, I'd have one of these. It's an absolute steal at 300 bucks, and if you're even remotely considering a short scale, this one comes highly recommended. Now, maybe it was because I had fairly low expectations, or I just had this, preconceived notion that I don't really care for humbuckers and active basses, but my number 2 bass of the year is the G&L L2500. The control scheme on this seems pretty complex at first, but it's actually a joy to use and offers you a dizzying number of really usable tones. And by golly, this thing has so much character. Now, I've only had an opportunity to take this to 1 gig thus far, but it was such a fun gig and I loved playing this and I loved the way I sounded. Excellent bass. The one thing I could knock it for is that it is by far my heaviest bass, so if you're planning on picking one of these up, get a 3-inch wide strap, it'll make a world of difference. This year I treated myself to quite a lot of bass purchases, but none were quite so extravagant as my number 1 bass, my Sarek Lincoln. Not only is this thing just an absolute work of art, it plays like I've owned it for years, which is pretty impressive considering that I have not touched the setup on this thing. And it's even more impressive when you consider that this was built in Chicago and then shipped to Salt Lake City, which are two completely different climates. Thing hasn't budged. It feels incredible. Jake Sarek and the crew over there really know what they're doing, and I could not be happier with the bass that they built for me. It is by far my favorite bass to play live. The tone of this thing is just so pristine and clear, yet still vintage feeling. I mean, sometimes you just really do get what you pay for. All right, guys, that about wraps it up for me. Let me know what your favorite bass of the year was down in the comments, and I will see you on the next one. AMP out!